would probably try to true his up to under a half a thou, which is difficult to do, especially if the brass case neck wall is out of spec, meaning, it might be thinner on one side than the other. And we're live.
Yep. Hello, podcast here on the Firearms Radio Network. Tonight, we're going to talk about a little more advanced brass prep and a couple other things. And looks like it's just Jim and I. So we were hoping to have a guest, but unfortunately they're not able to make it. So I'll have to save him for another time. I'm not sure about Jason or Jeremy. Haven't heard from them, so maybe they're joining us, maybe they're not. I do know Trevor is not able to join us. So he got involved in a project at his second job, gunsmithing, and so he won't be able to make it. So Jim, what's new and exciting?
Well, guys, I did it. I put a down payment on my new reloading room. You know how, guys, I've talked about over the years that we've been podcasting that I reloaded out of my barn. And, well, I'm going to be reloading out of another outbuilding. I invested in a shed that I'm going to wind up sharing with my lawn tractor and yard tools, but still it's my reloading room. And that's where I choose to be. And it's just simply because I have so much stuff that I don't physically have the space in the house. So there it is, guys. I invested upwards of $6,000. Oh, sorry about the iPad falling. There went the video. Hope I didn't make too many folks dizzy. But anyway, I invested upwards of $6,000 in this shed. Pretty good sized shed. Biggest they make, in fact. That's it, Michael. Over to you.
I went shoesting on Sunday. So went out.
Good for you.
Got up some loads that I made up. So.
And What'd you shoot? Tell me.
I didn't shoot squat because I was trying out my new toy that I showed off a couple weeks ago, my bolt action.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a 660 choke in it. That didn't go well for trap shooting. That's a turkey choke. For those of you who don't know
what
choke is. When you're shooting trap, you probably want to modify it at tightest. Some people even go. I've actually seen people who shoot with improved cylinder. Full is really pushing it. You got to be really quick and be able to be on the birds. And I was shooting with a turkey choke, basically. So I got 1 out of 25. I didn't realize it was a turkey choke until I was about 2 stations in and realized that I had only hit 1. And then I looked at the choke. Sure enough, it says 660 on it. I'm like, well, that explains everything. This shotgun was set up for goose hunting originally. That was the whole entire purpose behind it for Marlin. That's why it's a 2+1, 2 in the magazine, 1 in the pipe. So it's set up perfectly for that. So it's a bolt action. With practice, you can be pretty darn fast with bolt action. So it was really good for a goose gun. And the nice thing is no matter how dirty or muddy or nasty it gets, it's a bolt. So you can just beat it open. Unlike semi-autos, which some of them are rather finicky. But yeah, so I'm going choke shopping because it'd be fun to shoot trap with. I just need to get a better choke for it. So yeah, so I did some reloading and some shooting. I kind of ordered some stuff too. So
what'd you order? What'd you buy?
Well, so I decided that
you've been talking to Robin Sharpless.
Yeah, well, I decided that I needed some dies for my new toy.
Dies for what new toy, Mikey?
My 6.5 Creedmoor that I showed off.
Yeah.
So, if you're going to get them, you should get them.
Redding makes a heck of a nice die box.
Yeah, and they make some really nice dies too. So.
Ooh, you got the super duper competition seating die.
It is.
I forget the proper nomenclature for it.
Well, let's look at the destructions. It is the Reading Competition Bullet Seating Die.
Okay, Reading Competition Bullet Seating Die.
Yep. And another sticker for my collection. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So that wasn't the only thing that I did. We're always talking about body dies and pushing pushing the shoulder back. So I decided, since I was ordering from Reading, that I should get a 308 body die too. So tonight we'll show you all how to use this. So
I have a silly question.
what's your silly question?
Do you know how to use it?
Nope.
That's not a silly question then.
Nope and yes. So I've done it with a full length seating die.
Mm-hmm.
More of a pin in the butt. So but I have not done it with a body die yet. So I was kind of hoping Jeremy'd be here, but it doesn't look like he's gonna be. So because he explains it so much better than I do.
Well, you know what? It looks like you got something else from Reading too.
So this we're gonna talk about later.
Oh, it's a secret.
Yeah, that's not for tonight. So
Okay.
we'll talk about that later. So I've got a couple things here on the bench. I have my lovely dies. So I can put my 6.5 Premore dies away. We can put those away for now. I added 10 more pieces of brass to my loading block. So I've got
only 10?
Only 10.
Only 10?
And then I've got a Hornady lock and load comparator and insert set.
Ah, nice.
So that'll come in handy with this. The other thing I wanted to talk about was neck turning, but unfortunately, I don't have such a thing, and Trevor can't join us. So I was hoping to be able to have him show it on camera.
Mike,
yeah.
I have a neck turning video up on YouTube. You can use that if you want.
Okay.
I don't have a link for it, but if you know how to find my channel.
Uh-huh.
I don't have that many videos up, so it shouldn't be hard to find.
Do this. We'll find it quick. So anyway, Jim, I don't know if maybe some of the listeners don't know. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Reloading Radio?
Wait a minute. I didn't see it. I was actually I was on my feet turning off that fiber optic light that was behind me, and I knew it was distracting everyone.
Yeah.
What did you show me?
No, I was going to say, why don't you tell everybody about Reloading Radio?
Reloading Radio. I haven't heard that. I haven't recorded that podcast in quite a few years.
Yeah.
Reloading Radio. Mark Vanderberg. I was actually listening to podcasts, searching around for podcasts, and I happened to find Mark Vanderberg. And he was building at the time a network called Gun Rights Radio Network, GRRN. And, he was podcasting himself. And Mark is very much into the gun rights thing. And that's what he likes, and that was the name of his show, Gun Rights Radio, and all that. And that is his absolute bailiwick, his domain where he really flourishes. He really thrives on working in that avenue. In other words, you might call him an Alan Gottlieb Jr. or Alan Gottlieb II. And Mark, if you ever hear this, I am not saying that in anything diminutive towards you or Mr. Gottlieb at all. But anyway, so he actually built a forum, Gun Rights Radio Network forum. And I just happened to listen to his podcast or a couple of them, whatever, and I discovered Reloading Radio. And Reloading Radio was done by a guy at the time, uh, Jason Thomas, Jayson, Jason Thomas. And he recorded 10 shows ahead of time, which is fine. And actually, he recorded. I think Jason released 13 episodes of Reloading Radio. And I was like an addict. I was hungry, just like you guys are for what we're doing. And I was hungry for more and more and more. And Jason just drifted off like I did. Yeah, I kind of got ahead of myself here, but what I'm saying is it's terribly difficult to podcast by yourself. Terribly difficult. I don't have to tell Mike how tough it is because Mike did one or two shows of Reloading Podcast by himself. And that's when he come to find Jim Fleming of Reloading Radio in the Reloading Room, and he sent me a Facebook friend request, and all this kind of thing. The next thing I know, this booger right here that won't show his face tonight with that red reloading press right there, made out of cast aluminum, or zinc metals, die metal, pot metal, whatever it's cast from. Anyway, he asked me within days of sending me the friend request, or hours, minutes even, I don't know. He asked me if I'd be interested in doing a podcast. Well, I take it back. I got ahead of myself again. Anyway, so Jason drifted off. Yeah, let's get back to that. Jason sort of just fell by the wayside. And finally, Mark Vanderberg was going to take down the Reloading Radio forum section, the Reloading Radio section of his forum. He was going to take it down because there was no traffic, because Jason Thomas wasn't recording anything and all that sort of thing. And I was on the forum. I saw the posting go up, and I just opened my big mouth and told Vanderberg, I'll do it. Me, dummy me. This guy right here with the finger in his face. I volunteered. You know, what the military say? Never again volunteer yourself, NAVY. Some of you lifers know about that. Anyway, so I did. I recorded, I think, 6 good episodes. I think it was 6. I could be wrong on that number. But I recorded several episodes of Reloading Radio, and it was well received, and so on and so forth. But I just got to the point where I didn't know, I couldn't really do it. I just couldn't sit there and talk to myself for an hour or hour and a half and whatever. I was doing my own editing and everything. And I would leave blank spaces in there for Mark to insert commercials or, plugs for the network or whatever it was he was putting in. I think there was actually commercials on the uploaded version. My version, of course, never had any commercials. I still have those shows. But, I think that's what Mike's doing now is digging out the neck turning video I told him about. But anyway, so that's how I got into Reloading Radio. And then by me making a mistake of getting ahead of myself, now y'all understand Mike was listening to Reloading Radio, and he must have heard me talking about the Reloading Room on Facebook, and he decided to come look me up to see if I would go on the show with him. And I have to tell you, either it was the worst idea he could have ever done, or the best thing that ever happened to me, because we're going on 4 years, guys. That's why we're getting into the history of the Reloading Podcast. We're getting near episode 200. Let it sink in. 200. That's 4 years worth of material. Yeah, there have been a few weeks where we were a little slack and so on and so forth. But, that's why I said there's 52 weeks in a year. We're allowed to be shy of 8 episodes. But anyway, that was the history of Reloading Radio. Yeah, because Mike was on another network, Firearms Radio Network, and he didn't want to, couldn't for copyright reasons or whatever, I couldn't use the name Reloading Radio. Besides that, it would be plagiarism. And, you know, same guy on the two different shows. My information hasn't changed, but it still comes out of my head and my face. So I guess I own it. And besides that, Vanderberg told me that I own all the intellectual rights to every episode of Reloading Radio that he ever produced or ever published. Just like Mike and I own all the intellectual rights from every show that we've ever put on.
Mm-hmm. So definitely recommend checking out Reloading Radio. Some good stuff.
Yeah, the best episode I ever did was the one about casting. I had just taught my son that very weekend how to cast bullets, and I had the knowledge right there at my fingertips.
So
I don't know if it's even up. I think Vanderberg deleted the whole network.
I'm not sure. No, I'm sure it's out there somewhere. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show just a little bit of that video so you guys get an idea. And I'll show you just a bit of the video.
Turn your volume up, guys. I don't think the volume went over well on my iPad. That's a tubing micrometer in my hands. My wife is actually holding the iPad while I'm talking about turning the neck and so on and so forth. They're checking the neck size.
I think what I did is I think I screwed up again, and I think I muted it myself again, and it muted everything. So yeah.
Well, I know there's some audio on it. I couldn't hear a sound.
But,
no, Mike, if you would publish the link for that and make sure to put it in the show notes when you post the show notes.
So,
you know, I want people to know how to turn case necks.
So, yeah, I started coughing, so I muted, and then I left it muted and forgot that when I mute it, it means it mutes everything. So, let's try that again. Come on, cooperate.
My Forster case trimmer. On a block of oak wood that's probably 60 years old. Checking case neck wall thickness. I'm not sure if you guys understand what I'm trying to show you, but that tubing micrometer is graduated down to the 10th of a thousandth. And that's quite a bit when it comes to turning the case necks. Yeah, you can see that right there, the extra lines. I realize a lot of folks don't use micrometers daily, and they seem mysterious. I've been using micrometers for a long, long time. So that's why I'm familiar with it. And sometimes I forget to tell people how to actually use them. This isn't a video about how to use the mic, but looks like it's looping, Mike. Nope. There goes the case right into the trimmer. Now that pilot right there underneath that pilot is going up inside of there, up inside the case neck. That's the turning head right there with the 2 set screws. Actually, you can see the metal coming off of it.
Yep. So some people can hear it, some people can't.
Well, Mike, publish, if you don't mind, sir. Please publish the link in the chat.
Yep. And
thank you.
Actually, I'm also going to put the link in the Reloading podcast room right now.
Good idea. Yeah, good idea. Every once in a while, somebody discovers that video and they wind up following me on YouTube.
Yeah. So that kind of gives you a basic idea of neck turning. It's kind of like using the case trimmers, except for instead of the trimmer being on the end, it's
you're cutting on the side of the neck, and it's actually pretty precise. Now, precision means repeatability.
Yep. So here's a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you trim the inside of the neck?
Yes, it's called reaming. They actually make reamers to thin the case neck wall from the inside. And a lot of folks find that easier. I don't care to do it that way. I've got reamers for 30 caliber, 27 and 224 cases. I've got the reamers, but I don't care for doing that so much because it doesn't follow the case necks as much as I would like it to from the reloading die aspect. You know, when I resize that case neck, I want the axis of the case itself to stay true. But if those case necks are bent because of, let's just say they went through a semi-automatic rifle, or even fully automatic rifle for that matter, if the case neck gets bent a little bit, when the reamer enters the case, especially at the intersection of the neck and shoulder, the case itself could get it thinned and it would be non-concentric. At that particular junction, it could even be too thin, causing premature failure.
Aha. Oh, dang dogs. All right. So that's kind of, what's the benefit of trimming the neck?
Well, the reason why I did it was for my 280 AI, obviously, but it was to get the neck uniform. I wanted to take and have a 10 thousandths. It's an arbitrary number. It could be 13, it could be 12, it could be 9. I wanted to get the case necks to a uniform thickness so that they would work better with my Redding bushing neck sizing die. I forget the proper nomenclature, and Robin, please forgive me, but it's for the Redding resizing die, Redding neck sizing die that uses a bushing, a tin-coated bushing. When Robin and I discussed it, we just talked about, the arbitrary dimension for that case neck wall is 10 thousandths, and that's what I decided to order. Well, that meant then to get it to work properly so that it sizes the case neck down just 1/1000th bullet diameter so that when I seat the bullet, it expands just enough to tightly hold the bullet and not like a regular small base reloading die might do, fulling 3-sided small base. That might actually size the neck down, and you might find your neck, 6.4, 6.5 thousandths undersized. And now you've got to press that projectile down inside the case neck. And good thing for boat tails. That's why they actually invented it, to make it easier to reload. And but it turns out they fly so much better. But that's why it's so important that you get uniform. The idea is to get uniform bullet pull case after case. And if your cases are all the same size, you're going to get uniform bullet pull. Bullet pull meaning proper neck tension on the case and bullet, in the firearm itself on a consistent level.
So one of the follow-up questions of that is, how do you feel about small base dies for 223?
No. Well, it depends. If you're going to take him, no. And then I turn around and disagree with myself. It depends upon what you're reloading the ammo for. If you're going to reload the ammo to put it away for hard times, shall we say, yes, that's not a bad idea because it's a one-time thing. But if you use small base dies consistently on your 223 brass, run it through your AR-15 or your Mini 14, those rifles are chambered to military specifications usually. They can be different, don't get me wrong, I said usually. But anyway, when you're using mil-spec stuff like that, it usually winds up popping it open a little bit like a popcorn kernel. And what I mean is it'll actually take it out oversize. And it not necessarily works your brass. Just for your flow-through guns that you're going to go play on the range, I just suggest that you just get a full-length resizing die and work with that.
So M40A13 says, doesn't neck turning also make the tension of the bullet uniform all the way around the circumference of the mouth?
Yes. I guess I didn't explain that properly. Sorry.
Yeah. So that's one of the big things to do, is because when you're using a bushing setup or a Colette die, if your neck isn't the same diameter all the way around or thickness all the way around, then you're not going to get the same tension.
Mike, if you're interested in getting into case neck turning, a tubing micrometer is just about mandatory. They're
Yep.
not that expensive, but they are just about necessary.
So, what else? What else is important about neck turning? Can you turn it too thin?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, 10 thousandths is the smallest you really want to go. That's an arbitrary size. I've seen GI brass as thick as 15 thousandths.
Okay. Now, when you're talking 10 thousandths and 15 thousandths, are you talking about overall both sides, or are you talking just on the one side? Because not everybody may know what a tubing micrometer does or is.
Good question, and that's right. I forgot about our listeners, not just our viewers. Um, when I say 10 thousandths neck wall thickness, yep. Mike, if you have a pencil or a pen or something, touch the side of that case neck. Thank you. Right there where Mike is touching with his center punch or pointer or whatever it was. He's still working, trying to get the camera to focus. Right there. Thank you, Mike. That's good focus. Right there where he's touching, just a little point, the side of the center punch. I'm talking about the thickness on one side only. That is an arbitrary dimension that is somewhere between 10 and 15 thousandths. And on SAMI brass, SAMI Sporting Arms and Manufacturers Institute. But anyway, what you got there, Mike? What you got there? You got a camera?
Yeah, I don't know how well it'll show up or not. I was just using the flashlight on it.
Okay. But anyway, yeah, what I'm talking about, yeah, Mike, turn that case to get a little bit of light in the inside, if you don't mind, sir.
Sure.
Hope our viewers will put up with us. You're out of focus for a second. Anyway, yeah, if you could actually just a little light on the inside of the case. So the idea is, that case, that's part of brass prep is to get a good brush in there and brush as much of the dirt out. Don't use a bristle brush. Don't use a brass brush. Don't use a steel brush. Use a nylon bristle brush to clean out the inside of your case next. And if you If you do, you can also take in that case neck brush, your CBS case neck brush. You can put a little bit of lubricant on there to make it the transition of the expander ball coming out of the case a lot easier. You won't hear that screech sound that sounds like you're pulling the decapping stem right out of the die. Yeah, I'm talking about the side of the case, up at the top, not so much down at the primer where I realize Mike is having a hard time just holding still. You're actually seeing his heartbeat there, but the point is, I'm talking about that's a first quarter inch, 3/8 of an inch, whatever the case neck length it happens to be in this particular cartridge. I think it's a 308 case he's holding on to.
Correct.
So yeah, the whole down from the case mouth right down to the shoulder, that little bitty area is what I'm talking about turning. And the other thing is too, if you do turn case necks, you see Mike, can you touch the inside of that with a pin or something? You'll actually find a small burr in there because that case looks like it's been fired. A little bead of material actually going down inside the mouth of the case. Not down to the neck and shoulder. That's the neck and shoulder, that violet line right there. That's it. That's it. You guys get the idea. There's a burr there usually from factory crimp. If I don't know if it's factory round or not, but there's usually a burr from the factory crimp that has to be removed. Yeah, all this time we're talking about, and all we're talking about is either the inside or the outside of the case neck that Mike has shown us.
Sorry about all the bounciness. At some point in time, I'm going to work on trying to figure out a mount rig for that so I can have the camera mounted and then I can just bring stuff over to it. So if anybody's got any ideas, that'd be awesome. This is what we're looking at. So
send those ideas to reloadingpodcast@gmail.com.
Little snake.
Or come look us up or post it on our page or come in to join the Reloading podcast group.
Yep. So, I don't know. Let's see here. It's 7:34. Yeah, we got enough time to get into this. So, one of the things I was talking about is we were talking about bumping back the shoulder. Okay. So, that if you're going to do the bumping back of the shoulder, it's actually a 3-step process. Because step 1, how do I get that dang thing out of there? How do I get that dirty, nasty, old, nasty primer out of there without resizing the case? Well, you get something like this. This is a universal decapping die. And what this is this is a die that's set up with a decapping pin. However, it does not have sidewalls, and it does not have anything else to keep it in there. It's just strictly to punch the primer out. So as you can see, I can drop this in there, turn it over, and it falls right back out. Because it's a completely different size, not big enough. Wrong wrench. So
your camera finally decided to focus on the universal decapping die.
Wait. Sorry about the dogs barking. Kids just got home from play practice. So, as you can see, there is a huge difference on the inside of these two dies. That one's a 308 full-length sizing die. This, just a universal capping die. Still set it up the same way. Run the ram all the way up. and the die down. Sorry. Now, this one, it's not as critical for overall depth of the die. What is critical is depth of the pin. Why is that, Jim?
Well, if you don't get the pin deep enough, it's very simple. You won't get the primer out.
Exactly.
Guys, what we're trying to tell you is this die that Mike is setting up in his press is made for one purpose and one purpose only. And Mike's having a hard time with it. Yes, use 2 wrenches, Mike. Mike's having a hard time with that. That's an adjustment nut for the decapping spindle. And it fell, Mike. It's all the way through. Oh, he was taking it out to show us. Okay.
So for those of you who were here a couple weeks ago when I took apart the other die, you'll notice this doesn't have any sort of... Oh, sure.
Where's your expander ball, Michael?
Doesn't have one.
Yay. But anyway, that nut that's up on top that was giving Mike such a tussle is actually a sort of like a clutch. If you get your decapping pin too far down and you hit the case head with the body of the decapping spindle, it will actually push back up in through that split nut. And if you don't have it tight enough, it will also push back up. Yep, you can see the decapping pin right there sticking down through the shoulder. Remember, it's upside down. Through the shoulder, you can see it because this way you can, might go, yeah, thank you. Right there. You see how important that is? That pin must go through the shoulder at least a couple thousandths to push the primer, fired primer, out. Don't worry about writing the image. Mike, we all know we don't reload upside down. Oh, you did write it up. Anyway, there it is. You see, Mike, run the RAM up a couple more inches, or a couple fractions. Oops. Yep. You see, guys, that's that's the most important dimension there is for that particular operation is it has to stick down through the shoulder. Why does that happen? Because that's the dimension that you have to maintain to get that certain height of fired primer, which they're all certain height, same height, but I think it's 109 thousandths or something like that. But you want it to at least 109, let's say 112, 115 thousandths, just enough to push the primer out. That's that little object falling. That's a little object falling out that Mike is, when Mike pushed up the RAM, the little thing pukes out a little primer. Mike, if you would catch one,
sure.
Show us what happens.
So this is that primer, which I was showing you.
Now, if you notice, yep, if you notice on the next one, Mike catches for us, you'll see when he turns it over, shows the other side, you'll see the ash and stuff. You can also see the primer ash in the head of the cases that he's decapping too. Yep, see how blackened and burned it is? That's from the minute explosive charge that those primers carry.
Okay, so I've got 5, so I don't need this die anymore. So I can take my universal decapping die out. Put that away for now.
One of the advantages of using a universal decapping die is the fact that you can now tumble your brass with an open primer pocket and it will help remove the primer ash. The disadvantage is flash holes are tiny and tumbling media is also tiny. And tumbling media just loves to block up a flash hole.
So I want to push the shoulder back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this die, you'll notice, as soon as I hit save and bring the other camera back completely online, is actually, I think the other camera probably will be better for this. think I need somebody just to switch the camera back and forth for me. Okay, so this die here is...
Hold still, Mike. My God.
Sorry. That's why I need to create a mount for it.
Yeah, there's no decapping spindle in there, guys.
Oh.
All that die does is set the shoulder back a few thousandths. The neck sizing you're worried about is it done in another die.
Yep.
But anyway, let's get back to what Mike's talking about here. Bumping the shoulder, not the neck, the shoulder. Correct, Mike?
Yep. So
why do we have to bump our shoulders back?
The idea is we want to get consistency in the brass. However, we're cheap bastards, and we don't like buying brass. So our ultimate goal is to work the brass as least amount as possible. Annealing, we can adjust the neck, and we can brass does what's called work hardening. The more you work it, the harder and the more brittle it gets. When you anneal it, which we'll cover later, but basically annealing it is heating the brass up, retempering it essentially, and resoftening it. You're changing kind of the molecular structure a little bit.
Right.
Scientifical, but so, and yes, I did steal it from Tom Gresham. But what I want to do is I want to be able to resize that brass so I can put my bullets, powder, primer back in it. I can go put it back in my firearm and then go shooting again. And again.
Without working that brass too much.
Again. Right. So if I don't bump the shoulder back, it will not chamber in my rifle, more than likely. Especially if I've shot it a couple times. You can possibly get away with once fired, or fire formed, as we like to call it. Once you take a piece of brass, and it's a loaded piece of brass, so it's actually a cartridge, which means it has the bullet on the end, it has the powder inside, and has the primer on the other end. Once you load that cartridge into your particular rifle, and you pull the trigger and it goes bang, that is now once fired brass. Regardless of how many times it's been fired, for your rifle, it's now once fired brass.
Wait a second. Don't you mean fire formed brass?
Sorry, fire formed. Once fired, fired formed. Yeah. I mix. Okay, so
once fired is far different than fire formed.
Yes. Sorry. I was looking at something else laying here, and I got once fired in my head for some stupid reason. So once you pull the trigger, it's now fire formed, which means it is expanded out to the size and dimensions of your chamber, and then, as brass does, as it cools, I guess would be the best explanation, unless you've got a better one, Jim. As it
cool? The brass actually flows, just like squeezing a tube of toothpaste, and a toothpaste extrudes and flows out from under your fingers. Well, the pressure in this case is on the inside. It's the gas expansion. The brass flows under that pressure. If you've ever taken a ball peen hammer and tapped on a piece of metal and see the resulting dent that you get, that's brass flow or metal flow. In this case, the hammer blow is the gas pressure, and it's forcing the brass to conform to the inner walls of our chambers. And when it does that, depending upon the caliber, brass can be subjected to upwards of 75,000 psi. That's not semi-spec, it's actually dangerous. But, remember, there are some hot rodders out there that just think they've got to have, they can shoot enough, fast enough to take and kill them all with the sound or the vibration or the bullet overflight or something. I don't know. But anyway, the point is, generally speaking, you run your brass up to 55, 60,000 PSI. It's enough to cause the brass to start forming and moving, working it. Expansion, contraction. Not so much heating and cooling as it is just simple physics. Expansion, contraction. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I'm just working with tools while you're explaining. So, you need two things to do this properly. you need a body die. Yes, you can do it with full-length sizing die, but it's kind of a pain. More importantly, you need some way to measure how far you've moved the shoulder. So what I have here is I have the lock and load bullet comparator. And then this one actually is all of the inserts. There's different inserts that come with these kits, and you can get, there are different diameters for different brass. They're shiny. Ooh. But the bottom line is you need to find the one that goes about, let's see here.
There.
Shoulder. So
Right
like
there. Not the intersection of the neck and shoulder, down onto the shoulder, guys. That's what I'm talking about. About halfway down. That's also called a datum line. That's also a critical dimension for headspace, but that's another story. We haven't gotten to headspace yet, but Mike has got it right. That bullet cartridge comparator is ideal for what you want to do here. He's going to clip it onto his calipers.
So then you adjust it onto your caliper. My tip to you, do this.
Yes. It helps square it up.
Yep. There's nothing worse when you're doing this and all of a sudden you realize that this thing wasn't square in the first place and you just ruined 3 pieces of brass and now you have to full length.
Well, hello.
Hi there. Sorry I'm late.
No problem. We're in the process of explaining you one of your best products.
What's that?
The shoulder bumper.
Oh yes, sir. Yep. The actually I wrote a chapter in 19th edition of Handloader's Digest about that.
I see. Good to see you, Robin.
Good to see you. How are you? How's the new move, the new life?
Well, I had to invest some money to yesterday to put a down payment on my reloading room.
Oh, really? Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you. It'll be in the yard in about 3 weeks.
Beautiful. Oh, so you're going to do nice.
Yep.
You're going to an outside building?
Exactly.
That's like an Amish building, one of those types of things?
Exactly.
Very cool. I'm just trying to get this camera where I want it. There we go. That's better. Good. Hey, I have a story to tell you. You were the only one on?
No, Mike's over there. He's working on something right now. He was in the middle. He was in the middle of a process about how to check the shoulder bumper. If you don't mind, let us finish that aspect.
Oh yeah, sorry about it. Sure.
No, you're fine, Robin. Go ahead, Mike.
All right. So what we've got is set it up. So you check the spacing, the overall dimension, and then you start adjusting your die to be able to move it where you want. Now the directions say that it lightly touches the shell holder, and since we've got the extra,
Mike, speak up. Sometimes you're going off mic.
Oh yeah, I moved. So Robin.
Yes.
Just want to. How far back will it move it if you set it up to just base? Just have it lightly touching the shell holder.
It's interesting the variabilities that come into play with that.
Okay.
The largest of which is that the fact you have a number of axles on which the mechanism rotates.
Yep.
Based on the clearance of those axles, you have at least that much, which in even one of our presses can run 6,000 to 7,000 of variation. Now, variable 2 is the individual case that you're trying to size, because the harder the case is, the more it's going to compress that 6,000 or 7,000. When I wrote the chapter for Handloader's Digest, I took 40 308 cases from the exact same lot of brass, it was federal match, shot by our local sheriff's department, on the same day, in the same rifle, to try and have as balanced a setup as I could get. And what was intriguing was I used that process that you're using right now of moving the die back in a standard shell holder to create on my instant indicator a +6. 6,000ths over SAMI minimum chamber, which was it was easy enough to accomplish. Intriguingly, I sized 19 more cases with the exact same setup and didn't get another +6. I got everything from a SAMI minimum to a bunch of +3s, a couple +4s, and one +5. And that's all based on the variability of the hardness, the resistive force of the brass at the force moment, because without camming over, we don't wind up actually taking all of the slack out of the press. So part one is we've got pins. Part two is we've got brass that varies in its hardness, even if it's from the same lot made on the same day, shot out of the same gun under the exact same conditions. And the third part we have are something called class 2 A and B threads, which is the quality of thread in your 7814 used in reloading presses and dies. And they're loose and sloppy intentionally, so they're easy for you to screw the die in and out of quickly and reasonably. Back to why we need cam over. When we cam over, we take the full measure of the power that the press can exert, not the power that you can exert at the cam over force moment. And secondarily, we have removed all of the things that are in the pins because we flattened them out, and we've actually created the die squaring situation where the top of the force on say something like our Big Boss 2, the force there is somewhere in the neighborhood at cam over 2.5 tons for an instant. And so you're absolutely perfectly square. You're doing everything you can do. And oddly enough, I used the other 20 cases. We did a +6 Reading competition shell holder with a full cam over on a T7. And going back and forth on the instant indicator, we were either at a +6 or we were rubbing the top or the bottom of that +6 line.
Guys, if he's talking about his T7, it's a turret press. I don't
Yes.
particularly care for the turret presses because of they are known, not the Reading press, but there's some turret presses are renowned for having vertical slack. In other words, the turret will rotate at an angle, or you'll resize your brass and it will actually be tilted at a minute angle due to the slack of the central hub in the turret press. And now Robbins also mentioned his Big Boss 2 and the Big Boss press, which are both O presses.
Correct. The T7 worked very nicely for the experiment because obviously we could transition quickly between the sizing die and the instant indicator that had been set up with the big dial indicator and set up on a supplied SAMI minimum datum line gauge from SAMI minimum chamber. So that way we could quickly size a case, click the turret around, run it up in, and then photograph the result for the article.
So you met
What Mr. Sharpless is talking about is what Mike just did with these calipers and the Hornady cage comparator.
Correct.
You know, where Mike just had the calipers up and showing you the size from the shoulder to the from the mouth of the cage comparator to the head of the casing. And so Mr. Sharpless is talking about doing the same thing except a lot faster.
Yeah. And to a small degree more precisely. And I say that only because the Stony Point, which became the Hornady, has the entire shoulder inside of it. Mm-hmm. The Reading instant indicator has a ground surface, which is actually datum line diameter. So when we talk about a SAMI datum line headspace, we're talking about a given diameter and where that appears on the shoulder. The distance from where that diameter appears to the cartridge headspace is datum line headspace, as expressed in the SAMI books.
Mm-hmm.
So a little more precise.
It's a finite point. It's actually, I think it's 0.375 diameter point on the shoulder of the case itself, not on the intersection of the case and body and shoulder or the neck and shoulder. It's on the shoulder slope.
And that does vary by cartridge in some cases. So,
yes.
Yep. But exactly. And so what we're doing is we're finding that located point on the case, measuring from there to the end of the cartridge case head. And we, of course, have minimum +10 for chamber. We do everything off of chamber because we don't want to make your brass too small. We want to make your brass just fit a minimum chamber.
That's why we bumped the shoulder back 1/1000th under your chamber size.
Correct.
So what he's talking about is, unlike my case comparator, where you're hoping to get it at the same spot every time, and you're hoping that it's going to line up right every time, and you could have thousands to 100,000 difference. The tool he has is specifically designed to hit a certain spot every single time, no matter what the case is. And then it measures exactly from that same spot to the head every single time. So it's consistent. The other thing that you can have with this is I can throw the brass in here, and I may not have that completely flush against here. So I can,
Right.
Yep, you could
you know,
get it
there's-
off square.
One of the neat things about the instant indicator, and Richard Beebe, president of Reading, who designed it, says he really designed it wrong because it does too many things, and therefore it might be confusing to the buyer. It does about 7 different things, but the Datum Line headspace thing is beautiful because honestly, if you can pull the handle and bring the shell holder up to the bottom of the case or up to the bottom of the die, just as you do when we're reloading, we wind up with a very accurate measurement. And it's kind of a weird thing about Reading, but we make some sophisticated tools that are actually easier to use than the less sophisticated tools. Well, think about your competition seating die, right? Literally one of the best runouts, one of the most sophisticated seating dies on earth. The beauty of it is I don't have to be any kind of rocket scientist to say, I want to make this 2,000 shorter. And I look at my micrometer, I go, click, click, 1, 2. Okay, it's 2,000 shorter. I'm not working with I'm not trying to decipher a thread pitch versus how far I have to turn it and sort of guess and hope and pray. I know that it's 2,000s.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Grab that competition seating die and show the folks what Robin's talking about. We'll play show and tell tonight.
Well, thank you.
Well, sir, I do have a question for you, and this
Sure.
is kind of an oddball.
Okay.
Why is there only about 380 thousandths of graduation in that competition seating die?
Because they're actually made specifically for a cartridge.
Okay.
And we have enough room there to make that happen. We might run into a difficulty if we're using a very extreme VLD bullet, like some of the real extreme burgers, but we fix that by offering the VLD seat stem. So we change it based upon the bullet's shape.
Okay. Go ahead, Mike. Speak up.
So here you're looking at the competition seating die. All it does is beat bullets. And what Robin's talking about is here's your graduations. So if you want to change, all you got to do is in your lock nut, adjust your micrometer, your 2,000ths, tighten your lock nut back down, and away you go. None of this. Where's my other nut?
Yeah.
So if I want to do the same thing with this Hornady right here, what I have to do is I have to have got the dial set, and then I have to figure out, guesstimate a quarter turn. So I unloosen the lock ring here, and then I turn this down, however much I may wind up turning it, reseat the bullet, pull the cartridge back out, measure the thing again, put it back in, find out, because I was still 1,000ths off. So then I got to go through the whole process again. And then, oh crap, I went too far. Well, that bullet's not any good anymore. So let's chuck that cartridge off to the side and we'll use it for target practice. So then I got to wind it back up, start over. So that's kind of and that's why I went with those dies for the 6x3 mark. Because I want that ability. I want to be able to easily adjust that. So
it's an interesting point. Again, the same, granted, we're kind of the kings of micrometers, but it gets back also to the idea, for instance, if you look at our 2400 case trimmer, that's another maddening thing when I want to take 2,000ths off of the case because I've got it that close and I've got to unlock a little set screw and turn a ring and hope that I'm going to be wherever versus going, okay, here's my micrometer. I'm going to back it off 2,000ths. Guess what? It's 2,000 shorter. And we don't have to play that sort of twist and hope game.
What a nice way to say things that I'm not going to put on this podcast.
Very nice, sir.
Yeah, we would get the E for explicit.
We don't need that.
No.
Keep it a nice family channel.
Now you had mentioned competition seating or your competition shell holder set.
Correct.
Amazingly enough, I just happen to have one right here.
Very good.
So, but this is a special one, isn't it, Robin? What are we going to do with this one?
Oh, we're going to give this one away
We are.
when we're done with it
Yep.
to
So,
a lucky viewer.
yes. So, I wanted to let everybody know tonight, and when we do the drawing, we'll have Robin back on. So, we'll actually do the live drawing, and we'll have Robin back on, and we'll talk about
Fun.
Yes. So, but we're going to use these for demos. Should have kind of really put them through their paces and show you what you can and what you can do with these and why they're important to have if you're looking for precision reloading. So now
Nice.
back to this. So I want to bump that shoulder, and we're going to use this. So I check my measurement, and I've found that you get better consistency when you actually squeeze the caliper.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So not a lot of pressure, just some light pressure, just to kind of hold it, and then you get better because you're making sure that everything's fitting tight. So this is 1.660. Well, I want to push this back to thousandths. So what am I looking for, Jim?
Ooh. You're looking for 1/35 of a turn.
I would say guesstimated at a 1/32 of a turn.
Wow. Well, since we're 71.4 thousandths per rotation of a 14 thread pitch. You're close. I don't have anything
Robin,
to do all
knew
day.
you took the bait, you bum. You took the bait.
And
it's a guesstimation, guys, is what we're saying. It's a guesstimation.
It just can't
Yes.
be
So
done.
a little bit, and I got 1/1000th off. So it's just kind of a. Now, see, this is where. Ooh. See, this is where if I was using these from the start, it would be handy. And why would it be handy, Robin?
Well, it's handy because what we're doing is we have a known quantity, and that is that a standard shell holder is 125 thousandths deep from the top of the shell holder to the key seat cut where the bullet actually sits. A standard sizing die from Redding on a 23 to 30 degree shoulder is designed to push the shoulder back 8 thousandths under SAMI minimum, whereas we can anticipate on that shoulder angle, though that range of shoulder angles, we will have a spring back from somewhere between 6 to 6.5 thousandths, leaving us a case which is going to be, we have to require ourselves to be able to fit that minimum chamber that we all aspire to have, but unless we pay a gunsmith a lot of money, none of us ever get. So in reality, we're going to have a chamber that's somewhere between that minimum and the plus 10. So it gets very easy for us to do having those 2000s graduated steps. Remember, the beauty of this is the competition shell holder externally is exactly the same as the standard shell holder, but we cut that seat deeper, creating an earlier interference with the bottom of the die, not allowing the case to travel up as far, hence not allowing the shoulder to be pushed back.
Right.
Is that fairly clear? I've worked on that for years.
It's backwards, but it when you say it seems backwards, but it works out exactly right.
Correct.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly what Mike just did right there. Speak up, Mike. Make the camera focus on you.
So, basically, what Robin's talking about is the depth from here to here is different on each of these shell holders.
Because the shell holder stops the travel of the case into the die. And we want to stop that travel sooner, allowing the shoulder to remain further forward.
Further out, maybe, is another word.
Yeah, true. Yep. I think of it horizontally, but yes, correct. So what we're really doing there is we're custom head spacing the cartridge case to your chamber. But we're doing it in a repeatable manner because we can cam the press over and we can take away all of the slack and variables that exist in the mechanism and the threads.
And as I said before Robin came on, What we're talking about is consistency, precision, repeatability, being able to do the same thing over and over and over and over again.
Remember my 3 magic words we've talked about on here so many times: identify, quantify, and mitigate any variables that we can get. So we identify a variable, which would be cartridge case length disparities. We quantify that using a measuring tool, be it the Hornady Stony Point tool or instant indicator, or for that matter, if you happen to have a 20 power optical comparator and a set of blocks and wanted to try it that way. But however, well, realistically, you can do it that way. Depends how big a tool room you have.
Well,
but interesting.
even I don't have access to the kind of tools you do.
Well, but so the interesting part of it is, and now we want to mitigate that. We mitigate it by removing that variability through the application of some technique or tool.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the guys in the chat room wants to know, do the cutout on the Redding competition shell holders only work with Redding dies?
No, because it is kind of an industry standard that everyone designs around a shell holder that has a basic depth of 125 thousandths.
All right. So
I can hear the gears turning. Some people are thinking about pushing shoulders back. Some people are thinking about not pushing shoulders back.
Eventually, we have to push a shoulder back, because even if we neck size repeatedly, we'll hit that point of total obturation where the case won't properly extract or go back in.
Yep. Mike and I alluded to that earlier.
Oh, great.
So one of the key things, sorry, this thing just doesn't want to get out of the way. So one of the key things with this, though, that we didn't mention is, what other tool do we really need to have on hand when we're doing this, Robin?
Again, something that's going to measure your datum line is ideal.
Okay. And also, is this you could just check in their, use their firearm to check for too?
You can, and in fact, that's the simplest way to do it. Sort of without. Please don't take this as a sales pitch. This is just an explanation. It's back to that sophisticated tools that are so darn easy to use, because our outcome is very precise. It's very sophisticated, and we can simply take that case that we fired 5 or 6 times in neck time. So we've got our fully obturated case that just doesn't want to fit back in our rifle, or it's very difficult to put in. So it's simple. We know that it's going to be somewhere between +10 and minimum. So we start out by setting the die up with a full cam over on the +10. Lube the case, put the case in, size it. Does it fit? Nope. Okay. We pull that shell holder out, and since the shell holders externally are the same size, we slip the +8 in. Pull the handle. Does it fit? Nope. We pull that out. We push the +6 in. We pull the handle. Guess what? It fit. So that means we're somewhere between +6 and +8. We're within 1/1000th to 1/1000th and a half off of the datum line of the chamber, and we've got essentially what would be considered an absolute perfect cartridge fit, or the word that I seem to be the only person in the industry that uses. I like the term conformality. I want that cartridge to conform in every way to my chamber, but have enough clearance to go in and be removed without any difficulty.
We must be having some technical trouble, because Robin, I lost about 30% of what you said.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
You were talking about
it came through.
Talking about conformality.
Correct.
Oh, it came through, Mike? Okay, Go ahead. Guys,
Right.
I've heard this before, so that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
Please,
He's heard it in person.
Continue.
Okay. So, and again, that's one of the beautiful things about it is, again, we're capable of doing something that seems to be very difficult, very complicated, and yet we're achieving it with nothing more than a single stage reloading press, a set of cool shell holders, and the rifle that we shoot.
Exactly. But as you were saying, when you get the fancy measurement tools out, then you can get a little more precise and be a little more consistent.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I was going to say, because even though you're using the rifle the same, you're not turning the neck. There's still possibilities of maybe it not going in the exact same way every single time, and you could have variances.
More possible is also variabilities in springback, because we remember obturation goes both ways. Why a brass cartridge case is so wonderful that it expands and seals the chamber under pressure. When we exert the opposite force on it, trying to compress it, it wants to go back the other way a little bit, and that's obturation reverse, or we call it sometimes springback. So if a case has been fired 4 times or 5 times or 6 times, we may have a different rate of springback, and we know this because that +6 might work for a while, then all of a sudden I need to go to a +4. Well, it's because that case has become more difficult to size. It's fighting us a little bit harder, and to get to the point we need to be, we've got to push it back a little further because it's going to spring back a little more without annealing.
It sounds like you're getting, yeah, exactly. That's where I'm going, is you're talking about work hardening of the brass after time after time after time of being reloaded, and then you get into annealing. But then the thing about annealing usually is done with the necks only from the intersection of the shoulder and body up the neck, and that's it. You don't ever want to take and overheat the case head.
Oh, correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why, guys? I'll tell you why. Because when I made the mistake of doing it with my 270 Winchester, I got myself a face full of primer gas and cartridge gas and a whole bunch of other nasty things that got in my eyes, and I wasn't very happy with myself. And I only did it one time.
Probably pulled a lot of bullets and powder after that too.
No.
Oh, just the
I
one?
only did it with one case.
Oh, good. Yep.
That's always
That
a good
was many years ago.
one.
Go ahead, Mike. What'd you say?
I was going to say, that's always a good thing when you learn the lesson with only one case.
Well, and learn the lesson with no real injury. That's the other good one.
Yeah. Fortunately, I wear corrective lenses, so that protected my eye.
Good. So, yeah, again, back to the idea of the comp shell holders, they work so darn easily, so beautifully. And the number 1 set is great because think of everything that a number 1 case set is. You know, it's the 30-06 family, and it's the 308 family. So we go from 22-250, 25-06, all the way up to things like 35 Whalen, 708s, pretty much the whole. It's one of the most versatile numbers that we offer.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to give that, like I said, we're going to give that away, and we're going to shoot some video with it first. I'm going to do a little better video showing the process, other than just talking about it and going through and,
well, there's a fun trick that you may want to try, and I was shocked at it until Richard Beebe actually showed it to me using a 300 Win Mag. It's a little more difficult to push, but set up on one of our presses, set up a bright light and a white card behind, and do your normal thread the die down until it kisses the shell holder, and then do a good full length size without cam over, and you will actually be able to see daylight and actually see that white card, because the slack of the pins that are the axles and also the slack in the threads of the dies start to come apart, and something that you guarantee is hard down because you screwed it that way, when you put the pressure of a case in it under resizing, will open up a gap that you can visibly see.
We're talking about between the lock nut and the top of your press, guys.
No, we're actually talking about between the shell holder and the bottom of the die.
Oh, my mistake.
That's okay. Yep. So lock nut's part of it, but most of it happens down in the linkage in the bottom on the axles.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So, and I've got a couple of different presses we'll do that with too. So,
fun.
So, yeah. So, Robin, what else is new?
Kind of one of the really fun things is not really in the long range rifle spectrum right now, but at SHOT Show we introduced some new premium die sets for handgun cartridges. Much as we kind of, and remember, our premiums are our mid grade, so to speak. It's like the gas station, regular, premium, and supreme. So it's our mid grade dies that offer advantages over the standard dies, but don't have all the sort of difficulties of bushings and some of the other things. So the premium die sets for handgun feature our titanium carbide sizing die with a little bit. We've changed the entries a little bit to make them better on progressive presses. But the real cool part is we've come up with a completely new sizer for resizing or opening up the case for a straight wall case. And I don't want to say bell the case mouth as some people do, because we actually have a full-on expander inside of that die. And the expander has multiple steps on it. The neat thing about our new expander is it's coated in titanium nitride. So we're not picking up brass. It's much easier to operate. We've had one of the employees has done over 1,000 rounds of 45 ACP in it, and literally it's left no brass residue behind. But let me speak a minute to the expander concept. And what we have is we have multiple steps. The first step being a little radius to make it easy to enter, but then we have a full length expander parallel section that'll actually expand the case back to that 1.5 to 2 thousandths under bullet diameter that we like to have for proper neck tension. Above that is a very tiny 90-degree shelf. And that 90-degree shelf is so we have a square thing that we can, I'll use my thumbs here, we can actually push the bullet against so it's seated squarely before it goes into the seating die. And then above that, we have a flare to actually flare the case neck if necessary for something like a cast lead bullet, which we generally run a couple thousandths oversize. So it's a whole different thing. The beauty of it is having that expander, because basic handgun brass, just like rifle brass, has variabilities in wall thickness. And since we're sizing an OD to create an ID, we wind up with variabilities in neck tension if we just, quote, bell the case mouth or flare the case mouth. So there's some real advantages there. The third part, which is it's the kind of the crazy bench rester part, and not so, it's still applicable to handguns, is if there's any anomaly in that brass, we've pushed it in against the bullet where the bullet's going to pull from. And we could create an anomalous way the bullet pulls, either in terms of pressure or pull left or pull right. By running the expander in, we've taken that anomaly and we've pushed it away from the interface of the bullet and the brass, creating a situation where we get a cleaner and more uniform bullet pull each time. I know that was a lot. Sorry, I get preachy.
There's that fancy word again. Bullet pull. Bullet pull. What the hell is bullet pull?
Bullet pull is also referred to as start pressure. Bullet pull is the result of start pressure. And start pressure, of course, tells us what's going to happen with the rest of that bullet's trip. Because we speak of a pressure curve, which is false because it's really two pressure curves. We have the small pressure curve, which is the primer fires, ignites the powder, pressure builds until the bullet starts to move. As the bullet starts to move, we have a volume increase, which drops the pressure. As the bullets then come into the lands, the bullet stops momentarily, instantaneously. But at that point is when we begin the big pressure curve. Where the end result of that first pressure curve is what's really going to cause how efficient the burn is going to be on the remaining powder. And back to the idea of everything being the same. If our bullet jump and our start pressure are the same every time, we're going to wind up with a much smaller standard deviation spread on our velocities, which downrange is going to mean we're going to have a much better vertical string. We're going to have much less vertical string because we've lowered our SDs.
So simply by changing the dies, you're greatly increasing.
Yep.
It goes back to that uniformity thing. Where can we find a variable that we can minimize or eliminate? And every time we do, we build something that's more accurate. And that's kind of the fun of hand loading, guys, because once we solve one, we find three more.
Yeah.
So when you were coming up with this, did you tailor it for anybody specifically, or was it just kind of the natural of what's next for Redding?
We had been building that expander plug, so to speak, in steel, hardened steel, for a number of years. We also recognized that it was blued, and after a few thousand cases, we'd start to see brass buildup on it because normal transfer, wear and tear. Guys don't want to lube anything that they don't have to. And so we thought, wait a minute, we use titanium nitride plating on our bushings to eliminate that brass buildup, to eliminate the need for lubricating necks as much, and let's give it a try. Well, that required us to actually build a completely new expander plug because the old ones were a one-piece machined item. Now it's a two-piece part because we had to have a separate head that could be titanium TIN coated. And for guys, TIN's that pretty gold stuff on the expensive drill bits that you buy. And so the idea of it is it's an incredibly hard, slick surface, which doesn't create brass transfer or galling. And it also, it's one of those things. It's like the fact that we use titanium carbide versus tungsten carbide. Titanium carbide is actually harder and smoother than tungsten carbide. So, you know, if you're one of those IPSC guys and you're going to load 22,000 cases over the weekend, your arm will know it by the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the titanium carbide versus the tungsten carbide, you will see the difference in the actual tension of the press handle.
Well, thank you. Yeah, if we look at them under a photomicrograph, we'll notice that titanium carbide actually looks, it's nodular. So it's going to look like stones in the bottom of a river, sort of rounded, because even though it looks hard and smooth as glass under a microscope, it's not. When we look at tungsten carbide, it literally looks, it's crystalline. So it looks like sandpaper.
Yep.
And so it's harder. There's more friction, and it's easier on you. It's easier on cases. Theoretically, it would help extend case life. I love to tell people, you know, in the Bronze Age, how did you build a good sword blade? Well, you burnished it. You rubbed something hard against it to surface harden it. Hence, that's why we like to lube things when we can, because we're not burnishing the case. We're not hardening the outside as much, causing it to want to split later on. Yeah, I figured I'd sneak Bronze Age swords in here somehow.
Always dynamic, Robin. Thank you.
Oh, it's so fun to be on here. You guys do I enjoy your stuff a lot. I really do. Now I'm going to take one little personal treat. I've been collecting all of the old, I had an article on the latest edition of Handloaders Digest, and I've been collecting the older ones. And I recently was able to buy 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is 1962, 1964, 1966, and 1968. Anyone that has the time to get a hold of one off of eBay or wherever, they're really great fun because they're filled with good information, and also to look at what hand loading was back then, what the tools were, what the things were. And it's intriguing. In the fourth edition, which I believe is 1968, there was a little teeny company called the Belmont Company, and they made only one product for reloading. And it was essentially what we view today as either the Hornady lock and load system or the Lee breech lock system. So that existed in 1960, it's either in 64 or 68. The company had one product. They didn't stay in business very long, but I had to giggle. You got the part that went in the press and 2 inserts for $7.50 and extra inserts for $2.
Wow.
Mike just asked me a question, Robin, and I'm going to ask you.
Yes.
Before you came on the air and before we even went on the air, he was asking me about Krupp reloading products, KRUPP.
Yes.
Do you know anything about them?
I can look them up. I can look and see if we can find them in one of the old ones. It was intriguing that OHAS, the scale people, made dies. They made presses. It's incredible the people that were in the business back then. And
OHAS
yeah.
made my RCBS 1010 scale.
Correct. There was a period of time when Redding built one of the scales for RCBS as well, going back into the 50s and 60s. But there's some other interesting things that I found in there, and this is what I'm really kind of proud of. 2 of the books that I bought, and I bought 4 from one dealer. The editor was John Amber of Handloaders Digest, and of course he had been the editor of Gun Digest for almost 50 years. And one of the technical editors, a name that I'm sure you probably know, is Ken Waters.
No, I've never heard of the Ken Waters.
Well, intriguingly enough, Volume 2 and Volume 3 that I recently got off of eBay are the books autographed to Ken Waters from John Amber, thanking him for his contributions to the book.
Guys, Ken Waters is a designer and creator of the 7M M08.
Correct. And John Amber was his boss as the senior editor when he was a technical editor for Handloaders Digest.
Wow.
In the early 60s. So yeah, 2 of my 4 books that I most recently received are the books that John Amber signed with a cordial greeting to his friend Ken Waters for his participation in the book.
Nice.
Yeah, for us older guys, it's kind of exciting because I don't know. It's a really neat piece of history, really, when you get those two names in the book together.
Well, to the collectors and to those that actually know who Mr. Waters was, when Ken Waters passed, a reloading figure, he was, like Daniel Boone when it comes to blazing trails and reloading.
It was, and it was kind of fun for me. I was only disappointed that number 1 and number 4 weren't either, because they all came from the exact same spot in the same dealer. But I guess Amber only wrote the note in 2 of them.
Yep.
Durants.
So, you guys want me to take a minute and run around the corner and grab one of my old books and see if Krupp's in there?
Sure.
When I say that, it's 5 feet away out of this room into the next. I'll be right back in a sec.
Yeah, so this is the reason why I asked Jim about that. The scale right here in my many travels.
What about it?
That is why I asked you.
Hold it up in profile, Mike, so we can see it.
Here, I'll hold this up and show it off a little bit. The Handloaders Digest, first annual edition, 1962.
Wow.
And we have Hollywood dies, we have Latchmiller dies, we have Lyman dies, Pacifics.
Latchmiller, that's a name I haven't heard for a long time.
Yep. Perfection, I have a set of Carballoy resizing dies. Perfection were one of the first carbide dies. And I've got Perfection carbides on my Star Universal downstairs. Seiko Stubbies, Weatherby loading dies, R.J. Wells Incorporated reloading dies, Vickerman bullet seeders, Wilson sizers and seeders. Let's just see if, we would have had Krupp's. Well, let's see. H-I-J-K. We don't have Krupp's in this one because we go from Hollywood, Latchmiller to Lyman.
Okay.
Herders, C.H., but not in this edition anyway. It's very interesting to see. I mean, all the different powder measure companies. I'll hold it. I don't know if you can see, but Latchmiller powder measures, Miller powder measures. There was the market was diverse. I mean, there were literally dozens and dozens of companies out there making a variety of different things. It's anybody that can pick these up at a used bookstore or find them, they're just wonderful pieces of history. And it's fascinating to see that which is new again in some cases and that which just didn't work out.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, some of those old ones. So, but yeah, this was what brought up that question. Is in my travels bargain bin hunting.
Is that a Herders?
It's actually, this is made by Krupp American Corp. So I'm sure it was probably bought into somebody or something at some point in time.
Well, let's. I didn't go to scale, so let's see if we can find one, because it looks a lot like a Webster.
Yeah,
which is is pretty much a copy of a Reading number 1, but Webster then added the additional set screws in the end, so you could have sort of a 3-place measuring, or a 3-piece. Excuse me. The 3 different positions to level it with.
Hey, Mike, did you get a powder pan with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's funny, if we look in here and we look at all the Herders, the Bonanza, that's, I mean, you have to realize that is more of a Reading number 1 than anything else. And in fact, one of the issues, and I don't remember if it's 1964, for instance, the Webster number 1, the Reading number 1, and the Herders number 1 are virtually identical, to the point where there was some discussion that they were actually all made by Reading at one point. Yep. Oh, that's interesting. Because the pan hook is like a number 1, but the pan that's in it is like our number 2 pan.
This is one of Redding's scales.
Oh, okay. Yep, that's got it. Yep, that's a number. Sorry, that's.
We got you.
you
Michael
did.
got you, Robin.
Well, I got the pan hook and the pan right.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
That is a number one non-oil dampened, I believe, correct?
Yeah.
And it's a late one because it's green.
Yep.
The early ones were brown.
The one I gave my son is brown.
And there are
Has no dampening at all.
Correct. And there's one on my desk that's black. That's actually predates the brown. First year they were made.
Fun.
Yeah. Given to me by a friend on the West Coast. His grandfather died, and he said, "This is the oldest scale I've ever seen. Would you like it?" So
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So you did get me. Good job, guys. Although that's the wrong pan, just so you know.
I figured since you mentioned the Redding scale, I should grab one too. So.
Good.
So yeah, it's one of these days I'm going to get around to doing videos with all the different manual scales I've got and kind of showing them. So
that's fun.
Question.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, how old are the brown scales?
50s.
50s. My God.
The first thing that was made, and we actually have one, was Redding's first scale was really a comparator. It wasn't a scale that weighed a weight. It was a comparator that would allow you to reproduce a weight.
Right.
And that was 1946. And we actually have one at the shop that was sent to the National Rifle Association in 1947. And it has a little oak tag hanging on it from where they tested it for the magazine, found it to be accurate and approved it. And the NRA tag still hangs on it to this day.
Guys, we're talking about equipment that is 60 some years old and still out there going strong. Usually
Correct.
being handed down. This one was given to me by a friend, and I gave it to my son because I don't have the patience to not use the dampened scale. But the point is, the equipment is still doing just fine.
Correct.
In fact, Robin, that scale came in a box. Black box, as I recall correctly.
Yep, and it would have had a price on the outside.
It probably did. I think it was $16. Does that sound right?
No, I bet it was about $6.95 in that. It's a green one, a brown one. I'll bet it was under $10 because
it could be. I wouldn't know.
Yep.
That was a long time ago. I gave it to my son.
We have some boxes around that would probably be fun sometime for me to get off my tail, photograph some of them with the old prices, and send them to you guys so you could put them up for the folks to see on the Facebook group.
That would be.
There you go.
So,
well, thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
We'll have to have you back.
Amen.
My apologies. I know I kind of dominate when I go on here. I get talking and I have too much fun.
That's why we have you on.
Thank you.
Wealth of knowledge, and we love it when you get a chance to just regurgitate it. So,
well, it's kind of my life.
Exactly. I will see.
Well, let me say something here, Mike, if you don't mind. Folks, I have actually met Mr. Sharpless several times in real life. And finally, I realized I lived about, 2.5 hours from Cortland, New York. And that's where Redding Reloading Products is. What? Yeah. I've been in the factory. I've been in the shop. It's actually a shop. I've been in the shop. I wasn't there during working hours, but oh my God, the machinery they don't have. In fact, they're actually crowded. I got a feeling Robin wishes he could expand. But anyway, I've actually Robin was kind enough to take me through everything in the plant and in the factory, the shop, whatever you want to call it. And he held absolutely nothing back, although he did ask me not to photograph a few areas, which of course I respected.
Well, it was great fun having you, Jim.
Oh my. Morris and I were just so thrilled. And we still have our hats to this very day.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And hats made in America, by the way.
Yep.
Indeed.
Just like Redding products, made in America.
On American machinery.
Yep. And, it's interesting, one of the things I learned about the thread forming process on reloading dies, depending upon the caliber, determines when the threads get rolled on in certain situations.
Correct. Correct.
Rolled on, Jim.
What's that, Mike?
What do you mean rolled on?
Well, steel is malleable. Steel is plastic. Steel moves. It can be formed. Just like, yes, those very
Correct.
threads yes, those threads were not cut. Those threads were rolled on.
Early on,
Under
So-
enough pressure,
correct.
steel will move like Play-Doh, just like brass does in the chamber.
and it's the best way to make a thread, because obviously if you cut, you can tear, chip metal, have things occur. But when you thread roll, you literally are. Here's another interesting thing. We all know about work hardening brass, and of course our dies are all heat treated as well. But thread rolling puts it under tremendous pressure, which actually makes the die stronger because of the thread rolling process itself. Much as if you forge something, it becomes stronger. So we thread
tightens the
roll.
skin.
Yep, exactly. And then we also, the knurling is also done on a thread rolling machine as well. So
I've actually seen the die polishing machine that the ladies use. It's quite a sophisticated contraption.
it is. It is. And, everybody likes our bright little bands with our numbers and names and everything on them. And you've seen it. They're actually done with a belt sander, and then they're done on a rag wheel. I mean, true polishing. No tumbling, no chrome plating. It's the steel polished to a high luster.
Mm-hmm.
And one gal does all the ODs, and one gal does all the IDs. And they happen to be a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law.
Right up there above we're right above where Mike's touching with his fingertip. Yep, right there.
What he's talking about is right there, that shiny part when you look at
Yep. I've seen the contraption those ladies use too.
And we don't have to, but you know what? We work to one quality standard.
It's part of your, it's like a logo. If you saw a die that wasn't polished, you think it's not ready.
Correct. And I give Richard Beebe a lot of credit for that, because while the world likes to take shortcuts and cut corners and try and make it cheaper, we cost a little more money, but you and I have been through a number of the different products, and I show you all the different processes that we do, the extra steps that we take, and there's value in the dollars that you buy when you get from us, because we really put everything into them.
I know Mike is wanting us to get off the air because we're running long.
Yep.
Hang on, there's something else I got to say, guys. What this gentleman's talking about is he showed me how they make a powder measure. They don't just turn the inside of the measure; they hone it. Well, I'm talking about like with honing out a brake cylinder. They actually stone and hone the inside of that thing to get it concentric, to get it square, and to get it razor sharp to cut granules.
Well, they're just things that we do. Our press rams, for instance, we have them centerless ground, so they're perfectly concentric and round. Mm-hmm. I think you didn't get to meet Mike, but Mike that actually builds our rams. His Navy MOS was he was a airframe primarily. He was a landing gear mechanic on F-18s, and you know what? They're filled with hydraulic fluid and don't have any seals. They have to be so tight.
Yep.
And so that's his background, and he individually flex hones every frame to match its ram. So you'll never find a Reading with a loose ram. You'll never find a Reading with a loose ram after 30 years, because we don't leave room for anything to get in there.
Yay.
And as you know,
Mike.
Yep.
Over to you, Mike. Go ahead.
So Bill wants to know, are the threads rolled on the dies before the interior of the die is machined or after?
It depends on the die itself. On dies that have a thicker wall, they can be done after. On things like the bodies for the competition seating dies, which wind up very thin, they're rolled first.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you again, Robin.
Happy to be here, always.
Glad to have you. And I'll see you May 5th.
Wonderful.
So I'll message you. I'm coming down Friday afternoon, evening, and then I'm heading back Sunday afternoon. So
okay.
I've got a little bit of time to sneak in there, so I'm going to make sure I track you down while I'm down there. So
look forward to it. It'll be great to see you.
It will. And thanks once again for the shell holders to give away. That's an awesome gift.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you for the generous gift.
Well, you guys do a great job out there for all of hand loading, and I'd like to be able to support you when I can.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate it. So
That means a lot.
And I definitely will have you on when we go to give those away, so that way you can announce the winner.
Okay, we'll just keep it from the shoulders up, right? We don't want to see anything lower.
Okay. So, all right. Thanks again, Robin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And to everybody listening in the chat room right now, we're just going to sign off. I'll add the sign in or the hashtag, all that, and the audio. But thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining us. And have a good night, everyone.